Howdy y'all, I'm Ice Gold, and today I'll be making a video that was requested for me to make, and that is just a quick little guide for new players who are trying to get into the game. So, there's, I know I said brief, but there's a lot to cover even in the early game, so let's start with deck building. So, deck building is very important in this game. This is not exactly ideal, but what you want to do is you're gonna want a few specific things. Buffs, which include, blades and traps, and then hits. You don't really want anything else in your deck because it would just be like clutter, like you don't need dream shields, for example, to get by. So in the early game you're not going to have as many of these. Ideally you want to have area of effect spells, typically shortened to AoEs, and these will clear multiple mobs at once. But if you don't have them, I would say just use what you have. Like Locust Swarms, for example. If you're still in the early game, these can be good to use. You're just your 3-pip spells before you get your AoE. But once you get your AoE, it's pretty smooth sailing because this will defeat 2 to 4 rather of your enemies in one turn as opposed to just 1. So this is pretty useful. Another important part of the early game in Wiz is good farming locations. And I'll link a little gear guide down in the description made by ZYHunter, and their gear guide basically just tells you where all to farm as you go along. So Mount Olympus here, this is meant for level 30 and up. So once you get level 30, just come on over here and run Zeus a bunch of times. There's usually people on Team Up who are trying to get the gear, so definitely do that once you hit level 30. But until then, you can reasonably get by with gear obtained from the Bazaar in Wizard City. That is a place that you should go for really just about everything. There are better sell prices there. You can buy things for cheaper, and overall it's just really, really good. And the social tab up here, you can use those for quick teleports, and if it says your friend is busy right now like it typically does for Tabitha, you can just go to another friendly player who is there and it should work. Yeah, you can buy and sell a bunch of stuff to get extra gold, and you can just buy whatever you need. I would recommend clicking this just to narrow it down to gear that you can use, because if I uncheck this, it's 130 pages, so good to do that. But yep, ideally what you want to prioritize in the early game is pip chance and damage. Like the Crocotep's Desert Hood gives 3 of each, and this is really, really good. And power pips, I'll get into that later, but they are very important for when you are questing along. So another very important part of this game, and this doesn't just apply to the early game, it applies just throughout the spiral and your journey, and that is doing the Prospector Zeke quests. Prospector Zeke will give you a quest in every world that allows you to get an extra training point, and I'll go into training points later, but all you need to know is that these are very, very good to have. For the Celestia one, for example, I have already gotten all of the lounge lizards that I can, and with where I am in the story, except for the one in Celestia Base Camp, which is just over here. And, you know, these little guys, they're different in every world, but you'll find them in just, you know, different places throughout each world, and there are guides on the wiki that will show you where they are, and it's very useful to just use those, and you'll be able to find them. And once you find them all, you can talk to Zeke, and he will give you the training point and then all of the XP and gold that come along with the quest. So it's absolutely worth doing. So earlier you may have seen these little fists in my deck, and these are the sun enchants that you can unlock the base versions of here in Celestia, but these are very important because they add base damage to your spells. So if I were to use a Gargantuan on my Power Nova, the spell damage would go up to 890, which is a 225 increase from 665. So, as you can tell, having that much higher base damage before any multipliers like damage percentages and all that, it's very useful. However, like I said, you can only get the base versions once you get to Celestia, which is level 50 and up, but you can buy specific treasure cards. Like Monstrous is the most useful of these, and what this will do is you can buy these at any level, and you can just simply put them in your side deck and right-click a spell when you're in combat, and then click draw, and then one of these will show up if you have them in, and you can simply click on it and then click on another spell in your hand, and it will add 175 base damage to that spell. So Monstrous TCs are very useful in the early game because damage is low, even with Mount Olympus gear. So being able to add 175 to, you know, your AoE, like Sandstorm, for example, this would increase its damage considerably, and it would make your questing experience go quicker. And, you know, it's not limited to just the AoEs, so even if you're still in the early game and you have some gold, you can just get some of these, throw them on, I don't know, Scorpion or whatever, depending on your school, and, you know, this will increase the damage to 305. Although, you know, the path I have this on reduces the damage in favor of the utility, but don't worry about that. All that matters is that these spells will greatly increase your damage output. Now, another part that is, at the moment, specific to the first arc is Spellements and Spellement farming. What that will do is...
Who dares trespass in this place?
Shut the hell up.
I cannot allow any to enter this vault.
I don't care.
You will not
I've entered
leave
this
here
vault so many
alive.
times. I've kicked your ass over 100 times by this point. Anyway, Spellements on this tab, you can use these as you go along, and you'll get them as you go along for your specific school, and you can upgrade your spells with them. And it takes a grand total of 685 of these to go from the base tier 1 version all the way to tier 5. And you can only choose one path, so, you know, choose wisely. I usually choose the path of the utility because I'll eventually be taking this specific character to level 100 to do PvP. So, but if you are not looking to do PvP, I would always recommend the path that gives you extra damage, because as I talked about with the Monstrous Treasure cards, extra damage matters a hell of a lot. So definitely increase your damage wherever possible if you are not planning to go into PvP, because if you want to reset these, they cost a hell of a lot of crowns to do that. And by hell of a lot, I mean 100, which is one day of trivia, but you still don't want to be using crowns to do all that. So, yeah, and what the worst part about Spellement farming is that you can only farm Spellements within a specific badge range, which is why this character has been stuck at level 58 for a long time at this point, because I still need Spellements on some of my characters. But there are specific bosses out in the Spiral in the first arc that you can farm for specific spellment types. Vasek Ashweaver here, the guy who wouldn't shut up, he drops spirit-specific spellments. And then there is also Boris Blackrock in the Crucible, who drops elemental-specific spellments. And both of those guys drop balanced spellments, which is really good for me. So, I would absolutely recommend not beating Celestia until you have gotten as many spellments as you need from bosses like Vasek and Boris. And they're still pretty easy to kill. It helps if you have a high-level friend with you, but, you know, you can still do a lot of damage, and they'll drop a lot of spellments. So all of those little reagent icons that you see are spellments for different spells. In the spirit category, I got 3 Cyclops from that. That's crazy, but yeah, I would highly recommend just sticking around the first arc and not beating Celestia, because the badge locking system that the game has, if you beat the Jade Oni, for example, that gives you the Oni Slayer badge, which means you've completed Mushu. But what that means is you cannot get spellments from prior worlds anymore, which is stupid to say the absolute least, but it is what we just have to live with. And yeah, there's no way around it. So yeah, that is why I still farm Vasek and Boris, because they drop all of the rank 2 through 6 spellments, and they have the best, I guess, rates for it. There's another boss out in the Tower Archives named Zarathax who drops every school, but I'm gonna balance, so farming him is no fun. So I just stick to Vasek and Boris. But yeah, if you have the Astrologist badge, which means beating Celestia, you cannot get any spellments from Dragonspire anymore. So make sure you don't if you're trying to upgrade your spells all the way to tier 5, like I am. So just a rule of thumb. Now, my Google Doc on my other monitor says to talk about useful secondary school spells, but veteran players know that's just code for only train in the Death School up to Faint. I already have it, so you don't need to really worry about any of these unless you're trying to do PvP. Please let me out. But yeah, there is no reason to train any Fire, Ice, Storm, Myth, or Life spells. Pixie, you get by default. Or even balance spells, depending on your school. All you need is Faint, because, I mean, plus 70% to the next damage spell that you use is pretty strong. You saw I used 2 against Vasek in the previous clip. So, and I mean, you could stack these. This Faint stacks with this Faint, which also stacks with this Faint. So you can stack 3 Faints, depending on if you have the amulet and a pet that gives one, which is really, really useful. So definitely do that. So that's really all I have to say about training secondary school spells. Once you get to Celestia, though, you can train the aforementioned Fist enchants for the Sun School trainers that you find there. So that's what you can save your training points for. You can use the Zeke quests to do that. So that will just help you stay prepared, because you only get 1 training point every 4 levels up to level 20, and then once every 5 levels after that. So doing the Zeke quests will maximize the amount of training points that you have. I still have 10 on my level 58 balance, which is a lot, to be completely honest with you. So when you're thinking about doing secondary schools, don't worry about any other school other than Death. And then if you are a Death Wizard, just don't worry about anything at all. You could argue training Ice up to Tower Shield can be useful, but these exist, so no real point in that. So just something to keep in mind. So my Google Doc also says to touch on each school's strengths and weaknesses briefly, but what it really just boils down to is watch the video that I made the other day where I talked about the schools and how I would rank them in terms of usefulness in PvE. And yeah, some schools are unfortunately inherently better than others, but they all have their strengths and weaknesses. Balance, for example, is really good at support and buffing their teammates. So, you know, if you want to play a good support role, I'd recommend Balance, but there are other classes that are good in their own ways, so I would recommend just watching the video that I have in the description. So as of right now, there are 2 side worlds in Wizard101, with one of them having this Winter Tusk expansion, and I would recommend doing all 3 of them. I would recommend doing Wisteria after you finish Marleybone, because it will get you some extra XP, which is critical when you finish Marleybone, because by then you'll usually be around level 25 or 26, and Wisteria will get you to around 28, 29, something like that. And that's if you're only doing the story, which is what I would recommend doing. So do Wisteria after you finish Marleybone, and it'll allow you to start Mushu and then be able to get to Mount Olympus pretty quickly after you start. But for Grizzleheim and its Winter Tusk expansion, I would recommend doing both after you finish Dragonspire. Grizzleheim is easy enough, but Winter Tusk is particularly hard. So if you have like a duo with you, it'll be fine, but if you're trying to solo, I would recommend like trying it, and if you can handle these who love spamming their shields, you should be fine, because Winter Tusk is where a lot of XP comes from, and you know, you can get your rank 7 level 48 spell, and that'll make this world a lot more bearable. So it's very worth doing, because it'll get you to level 60 and Waterworks much quicker than it would be if you just did Celestia straight after Dragonspire. So definitely do all 3 of the side worlds. Now, there's been a new mechanic added to the game in the last year called Arch Mastery. So what this will dictate what kinds of power pips you get. So if you have your Arch Mastery set to balance, you will get balance pips, and these balance pips can be used for spells like Ninja Piglets, Didym's Resurgence, Samurai, and all of the other balanced lore spells that require one, but they can also just be used as power pips for specific schools. So, you know, if I wanted to use Vampire for some reason, all I would have to do is switch my Arch Mastery to Death, and not only could I use Vampire with these Death pips, but I could also use my balance spells with them. And like I could use an Elemental Golem, for example, with 2 Death power pips, just like I would be able to use Vampire. And you can change this mid-battle. There is a little thing at the bottom. I'll get into the battle and show you. So when you're in a battle, if you want to switch over to Death pips, for example, you can just choose this and then switch to Death, and just like that, next round I will get a Death pip. So as you can see, well, I did get a Death pip because I converted my other power pip into one, but yep. Now if I wanted to, I could use Banshee, because I have 1 Death power pip and 1 regular pip, and it would not use the balance pip. So I could also use Sandstorm, like I will, and it'll take the balance and Death pip up. And it, yeah, see, over on the left, it functions like that. So just a cool little mechanic. Would absolutely recommend looking into. It's not going to matter too much, but if you want to like heal, I guess, with the Pixie spell that you get by default, you could just switch to life pips mid-battle and go ahead and use that. But yeah, just a cool new mechanic. Now, I've talked a bit about power pips and all that, and you're probably wondering, oh, you know, what is a pip? And, you know, it's this little one pip is gonna be like a little white pip at the foot of your character in a battle. So, you know, there's that. And honestly, Diego the Duel Master will give you a tutorial tip somewhere pretty early on into the game, and he'll explain what all of those do. In fact, I think that even the tutorial explains it, but power pips count for 2, whereas regular pips just count for 1. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on briefly is also something that, you know, low levels are going to have kind of a hard time getting into, but it's pet hatching and pet bodies. So as you can see here, my pet is a Mega Snappy Griffin with 5 damage talents. This is going to take you a while to get, but once you do, it's absolutely worth it, because this specific body gives me 33 extra percentage points in damage. And balance specifically. So I would absolutely recommend getting a pet as soon as you are able, but hatching them in the hatchmaking kiosk out in the pet pavilion does cost quite a bit. So I don't really think you should expect to be able to hatch until maybe around, I don't know, Marleybone, something like that, once you're able to get your hands on about like 50,000 gold or something like that. But they are very customizable. You can also get extra resistance talents just to boost that. So it's like, if my damage is 96 right now, my resist is 9 with, you know, 19 to balance. Just that. You could switch over to this pet and your resist would go up, but your damage would go down. So there's that. Now, pet bodies are important because, as I was mentioning earlier, their cards stack alongside the base versions. So, you know, Balance Blade from here, but I also get a Balance Blade from my pet. So this stacks with this, and my hat also gives me an extra Balance Blade. So just like that, 1, 2, 3 Balance Blades that I can stack on myself. And that's very useful, especially as you get into the later worlds where things start to have more health, and just having more multipliers is always helpful. My pet also gives a feint. This feint, I believe, yeah. So, and as I mentioned earlier, this feint plus this feint plus this feint equals a hell of a lot more damage. So the best pet bodies that I could recommend are pet bodies that give an extra blade and an extra feint. Not every school can get a pet body that gives an extra feint, but there are some that can, and I would recommend getting one if at all possible. Well, thank you all for watching. I hope I was able to cover enough in this little video. I probably went on for quite a bit longer than I was expected, but there's a lot of stuff, even for new players, to learn. So it might seem all complicated, but I would recommend getting into all that and learning what each of these things do, because as you go along, and especially once you hit the second arc, things like, you know, blade and feint stacking is going to matter a lot more. So just remember some of the things that I said here if you're just getting into the game, and you should be good to go. The game is not that long, but it does take some time to go from level 1 to 160, so just be prepared to not be able to blow through it in like a day. So, yep, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, y'all.